When civilizations reach a certain level of technological advancement, they inevitably develop three things: faster-than-light travel, bureaucracy that would make a black hole seem efficient, and an unshakable conviction that they are the pinnacle of evolutionary achievement. The interstellar...
According to YouTube analytics, 98% of viewers are not subscribed. That's a huge number. By subscribing the channel that is completely free, you'll help support the channel and never miss fresh content.
Military Academy embodied all three with the kind of pompous excellence that only millennia of unchallenged superiority could produce. The facility sprawled across the crystalline plains of Valerix Prime, like a monument to galactic cooperation, which was really just a polite way of saying the 12 founding species had agreed to stop shooting at each other long enough to build something impressive. Towers of processed neutronium reached toward violet skies, their surfaces etched with the achievements of 10,000 graduating classes. The architecture screamed permanence, prestige, and please don't notice we built this on a subjugated world's ruins. At the main gate, cadets from across known space queued for their first day of processing. The line moved with the speed of continental drift, which gave everyone plenty of time to size up their competition and silently judge each other's species. The Krelnaks stood tallest, their forearms crossed in that universal gesture of martial superiority, chitinous plates gleaming like obsidian armor. The Velshiri clustered together, their scaled faces impassive, but their tail movements betraying constant communication. Even the diminutive Pixelon managed to look down their elongated snouts at everyone, despite needing anti-gravity platforms just to reach chest height on most species. Then there was the human. She stood in line like she belonged there, which was already suspicious to most observers. Humans had only achieved interstellar capability 2 generations ago, barely enough time to figure out which end of a plasma rifle got hot. Her species had spent most of recorded galactic history trapped on a backwater planet, completely oblivious to the fact that the rest of the universe was out here having adventures. Now here she was, wearing the standard Academy jumpsuit, like she expected people to take her seriously. The Krelnak's cadet 3 spots ahead noticed her first. His mandibles clicked in what passed for laughter among his species. Look, they let one of the apes in. His companion, a Velshiri with ceremonial combat scars, turned to examine the subject of mockery. Earthborn? They approved an Earthborn? I thought that planet was still under developmental observation. Observation period ended last cycle, the Krelnaks replied, his voice dripping with the kind of disdain usually reserved for malfunctioning waste disposal units. Apparently, they met the minimum requirements, minimum being the operative word. The human kept her eyes forward, jaw set in that peculiarly stubborn way her species had perfected through countless generations of refusing to acknowledge when they were outmatched. Her frame was compact compared to most species present, built along lines that suggested her evolutionary ancestors had prioritized something other than intimidation. Brown skin, dark hair pulled back in a practical knot, and eyes that tracked everything despite her apparent disinterest in the commentary. They barely have skeleton structure, a Pixelon observed from his floating platform, circling the human like a particularly judgmental moon. How does something so soft survive basic training? Do they just apologize when predators attack? This generated a ripple of clicking, hissing, and frequency-modulated laughter through the line. The human's expression did not change, which somehow made the mockery intensify. Species across the galaxy had learned that the best way to assert dominance was to provoke a reaction. Lack of reaction meant either supreme confidence or supreme stupidity, and nobody was betting on the former. The line shuffled forward. Security checkpoints at the Interstellar Military Academy were not the casual metal detectors and bag searches of primitive worlds. These were full-spectrum biological scanners, capable of detecting everything from concealed weapons to unauthorized genetic modifications to that sandwich you were probably not supposed to bring through customs. The Academy took security seriously, mostly because the last time they did not, a Krellnax princeling had smuggled in a genetically modified war beast that ate 3 instructors before anyone managed to stun it. A Velshiri cadet passed through the scanner without incident, the display flickering green before chiming approval. The Krellnax, who had been providing commentary, stepped up next, his chitinous bulk barely fitting through the archway. Another green light, another chime. The process had become rhythmic, almost meditative in its repetition. Then the human stepped forward. The scanner hummed, its sensor arrays focusing on the new subject, with the dispassionate efficiency of a machine that did not care about your feelings or your place in the galactic hierarchy. Energy fields washed over her frame, penetrating through cloth and skin and bone, cataloging every molecule, every cell, every microscopic detail that made her what she was. The display flickered. Then it turned red. Not the amber of caution or the yellow of minor concern, but the deep crimson of immediate threat assessment, the kind of red that usually accompanied words like containment breach or planetary evacuation. The scanner's pleasant chime transformed into a harsh klaxon that cut through the ambient noise of the processing center like a plasma blade through butter. Every head turned. Every conversation stopped. Even the perpetually bored security officers snapped to attention with the kind of speed that suggested recent disciplinary action. The display began cycling through text, each line more alarming than the last. Species identified. Homo sapiens origin world. Earth. Sol 3. Classification. Death world. Native threat. Assessment. Extreme recommended protocol. Do not engage. The Krellnax cadet took an involuntary step backward, his earlier bravado evaporating like water on a reactor core. The Velshiri's scales rippled in the chromatic pattern that indicated confusion mixed with a healthy dose of, "Oh no, what have we done?" Even the Pixelon's anti-gravity platform bobbed nervously as its occupant reassessed every life choice that had led to this moment. A security officer approached, his 3-fingered hand hovering near the neural disruptor at his hip. He was Talvex, a species known for their military discipline and complete inability to understand sarcasm. His face bore the expression of someone whose morning had just become exponentially more complicated. "Cadet," he said, his translator rendering the word with the appropriate mixture of authority and barely contained panic. "Please remain still while we verify this reading." The human complied, because apparently standing still while armed security freaked out was just another Tuesday for her species. Her expression remained neutral, but something flickered in her eyes. Not fear, not even surprise. More like resignation mixed with a dash of, "Here we go, again." The officer consulted his datapad, scrolling through screens of information that made his face progressively more concerned. "The scanner indicates you are classified as a Category 7 biohazard." "That seems excessive," the human replied, her voice carrying the flat affect of someone who had this conversation before. Category 7 is reserved for species capable of spontaneous violence, extreme environmental adaptability, and psychological warfare tactics. The officer continued, reading directly from the screen now because protocol was the only thing standing between him and complete chaos. "Your planet is listed as quarantined for galactic safety." The quarantine was lifted, the human pointed out, pulling out her own datapad with the kind of weary patience usually exhibited by parents, explaining obvious concepts to particularly dense offspring. I have my enrollment authorization right here. All the signatures, all the genetic screenings, all the psychological evaluations that confirmed I am probably not going to murder everyone in their sleep. Probably? Nobody's perfect. The security officer looked like he wanted to argue but could not find fault with her logic, which was itself deeply concerning. He glanced at his colleague, who shrugged in the universal gesture of "this is above my pay grade." Behind them, the line of cadets had grown quiet. The mockery had died somewhere around the words, "do not engage," replaced by the kind of cautious reevaluation that occurred when prey animals realized they might have been taunting a predator. The scanner continued its alarm, red light bathing the checkpoint in crimson warning. Somewhere in the administrative towers above, alerts were triggering. Protocols were activating. Important people with impressive titles were about to have their morning disrupted by the realization that they had approved an application without reading the fine print. The human stood in the center of it all, waiting with the patience of a species that had spent most of its evolutionary history being patient right before doing something spectacularly violent. This was going to be an interesting semester. 15 minutes into the lockdown, 3 administrators materialized at the checkpoint with the harried expressions of people who had just discovered their paperwork might actually kill someone. The lead administrator was a Corvati, her crystalline skin refracting light in patterns that betrayed stress despite her species' legendary composure. "Explain," she demanded, her voice cutting through the continued wailing of the alarm with practiced authority. The security officer gestured helplessly at the display, which had not stopped broadcasting its dire warnings. The system flagged her as Category 7. Protocol requires immediate containment and threat assessment. "I can see what the protocol requires," the administrator snapped, scrolling through her own datapad with increasing agitation. "What I cannot see is how this application bypassed 6 different screening committees without anyone noticing the applicant was from a restricted world." The second administrator, a Velshiri with administrative markings, cleared his throat in a way that suggested he had discovered the answer and wished he had not. The restriction was lifted 8 standard months ago. Earth completed its observation period and met minimum requirements for limited integration. Limited being the operative word, the Corvati muttered, her crystalline features shifting through colors that indicated profound irritation. Who approved full military academy access? Nobody volunteered that information, which was answer enough. The human remained motionless throughout this exchange, exhibiting the kind of stillness that most species associated with either meditation or calculating optimal attack trajectories. Her eyes tracked each speaker, absorbing information with an intensity that made several observers uncomfortable without quite understanding why. The classification system was implemented 70 cycles ago. The third administrator finally spoke up, a Pixelon whose age was betrayed by the oxidation patterns on his cranial implants. After the first contact incident, this generated immediate attention. First contact incidents were the kind of historical footnotes that civilizations preferred to bury under layers of diplomatic language and convenient memory failures. There were 17 human vessels operating in contested space during what they called an exploratory mission. The elderly Pixelon continued, pulling up archived files that made everyone's datapads flash with security warnings. They encountered a Krellnax battle group, standard protocol, dictated identification, and territorial assertion. The Krelnax cadet who had been mocking the human earlier suddenly found the floor fascinating. The Krelnax fired warning shots, as was their right in defended territory. The human vessels were outgunned, outmaneuvered, and completely outclassed by every military metric. The administrator paused, his expression suggesting the next part of the story defied those same metrics. They attacked anyway. Silence settled over the checkpoint like a suffocating blanket. Not retreated, not surrendered, not even attempted negotiation. They just attacked. The Pixelon's voice carried the kind of bewildered respect usually reserved for natural disasters. 3 human ships were vaporized in the first exchange. The remaining vessels continued engaging. When their weapons failed, they rammed Krelnax cruisers. When their ships were disabled, escape pods launched boarding parties. Boarding parties, the Korvati repeated, her voice flat with disbelief. Against Krelnax warriors, with hand weapons. They captured 2 cruisers before reinforcements arrived, the administrator confirmed. The Krelnax commander filed an official complaint describing human combat doctrine as psychologically traumatic and requesting they be classified as a hostile species. We lost. The human spoke for the first time since the administrators arrived, her voice carrying across the checkpoint with uncomfortable clarity. That engagement. We lost badly. 70% casualties. Mission failure on every objective. You call that losing? A Velshiri cadet whispered. We call that Tuesday. The human replied, and something in her tone suggested she was not entirely joking. The Korvathi administrator's colors shifted to deep purple, which indicated she was reassessing reality itself. Subsequent analysis revealed Earth as a Class 12 death world. Gravity, 1.3 times galactic standard. Atmospheric oxygen levels toxic to most species. Predator-to-prey ratios that should have prevented sapient evolution. Your planet is essentially designed to kill everything on it. It tries, the human acknowledged. We try harder. Hence the classification. The elderly Pixelon concluded. Do not engage is not a suggestion. It is a warning. Your species does not surrender, does not retreat, does not acknowledge superior force as a reason to stop fighting. Every military psychologist who studied the data concluded humans possess a fundamental rejection of survival instinct when threatened. We call it stubbornness, the human said. We call it terrifying, the administrator corrected. After 2 hours of emergency meetings, legal consultations, and one very uncomfortable conversation with the Academy Commandant, the administration reached a conclusion. Technically, the human had broken no rules. Technically, her enrollment was valid. Technically, they could not revoke admission based solely on species classification without violating 17 different anti-discrimination treaties they had spent decades negotiating. Technically, they were stuck with her. The compromise involved additional monitoring, mandatory psychological evaluations, and assignment to Training Group 7, which everyone understood was code for, we are putting her with the expendable cadets just in case. If something went catastrophically wrong, at least the casualties would be limited to students nobody had particularly high hopes for anyway. Training Group 7 assembled in Combat Arena Theta 9 the following morning. The facility was designed to simulate hostile environments, which meant it could generate everything from vacuum conditions to corrosive atmospheres to gravity wells that would liquefy most organic matter. Today's scenario was relatively mild. Urban combat simulation, standard gravity, breathable atmosphere. the kind of exercise designed to weed out cadets who looked impressive on paper but folded under actual pressure. The Krelnax from the security checkpoint stood at the front of the formation, his earlier mockery replaced by visible tension. Beside him, a cluster of Velshiri cadets checked their equipment with the obsessive focus of people who suddenly understood they might actually need it. The Pexlon hovered nearby, his anti-gravity platform adjusted to maximum evasion protocols. The human stood slightly apart, her issued combat gear fitted awkwardly to her non-standard frame. She carried a standard-issue plasma rifle that looked oversized in her grip, and her expression suggested she was already calculating its inadequacies. Instructor Velkoth entered with the confidence of someone who had survived 40 cycles of combat and considered training exercises a vacation by comparison. His species, the Drexnai, were legendary warriors, and his scarred hide testified to encounters that would have killed lesser beings. "Your objective is simple," he announced, his voice resonating through the arena. "Capture and hold the designated structure against opposing forces. Teamwork will be evaluated. Individual combat prowess will be evaluated. Your ability to not die will be evaluated." He paused, his gaze settling on the human with the kind of attention usually reserved for unexploded ordnance. "Rules of engagement. Non-lethal force only. Medical teams are standing by. If you surrender, you are eliminated from the exercise but not from the academy. This is training, not warfare. Am I understood?" Affirmative responses echoed through the arena. "Begin." The scenario activated. Holographic buildings materialized around them, creating an urban landscape complete with cover positions, elevation advantages, and enough tactical complexity to challenge experienced soldiers. Somewhere in that digital maze, automated defense drones waited with weapons set to stun. The objective building glowed blue in their helmet displays. 300 meters ahead through contested territory. The Krelnax immediately took command, his species' natural authority asserting itself. Standard advancing formation. Heavy shields forward. Support weapons on flanks. We move as a unit. It was textbook strategy. Solid. Conservative. The kind of approach that military academies across the galaxy had taught for generations because it worked against conventional threats. They had advanced 50 meters when the human disappeared. Nobody saw her leave formation. One moment she was maintaining position at the rear. The next she was simply gone, vanished into the holographic architecture like smoke, dissipating into atmosphere. "Where did she go?" the Velshiri demanded, scales rippling with agitation. "Maintain formation," the Krelnax ordered, but uncertainty crept into his voice. "She probably panicked. We continue without her." They advanced another 30 meters before the drones activated. Standard protocol, suppressing fire to pin down the advancing unit, then systematic elimination. The cadets responded exactly as trained, establishing overlapping fields of fire and coordinated defensive positions, which was when the first drone exploded. Not stunned, not disabled, exploded, fragments scattering across the holographic street in a pattern that suggested something had physically torn it apart. The cadets stared at the wreckage, confusion spreading through their formation like a virus. Then the second drone went down, then the third. Each elimination came from a different angle, each attack executed with a precision that suggested the attacker knew exactly where every weakness existed. In the observation deck above the arena, instructors watched their displays with expressions ranging from confusion to professional alarm. "Is the scenario malfunctioning?" someone asked. Instructor Velkoth expanded the tactical view. isolating the human's position through her armor transponder. She was moving through the arena like something that evolution had specifically designed to hunt in urban environments, using terrain that other cadets treated as obstacles. She climbed surfaces that should not have been climbable, squeezed through gaps that should not have accommodated her frame, and approached threats from angles that military doctrine insisted were impossible. She is not following any standard tactical doctrine, an observer noted. She is not following any tactical doctrine, Velkoth corrected, watching as the human disabled another drone using what appeared to be hand-to-hand combat against a flying weapons platform. She is improvising. Below, Training Group 7 finally reached the objective building, only to discover the human already inside, having apparently cleared the entire structure while they were still establishing defensive perimeters. She waved at them through the window. The training room had fallen silent except for the hum of environmental systems and the labored breathing of Cadet Zelvath, still crumpled against the far wall where Martinez had left him. The human stood in the center of the mat, barely winded, while medics rushed to attend to the Krethian who'd been so confident mere minutes ago. Commander Velthar approached slowly, his mandibles clicking in what Martinez had learned to recognize as deep thought. That was illuminating, Specialist Martinez. Just following orders, sir. Martinez rolled his shoulders, already feeling the familiar ache that came after holding back. That was the thing nobody understood. Showing restraint hurt worse than going all out. Indeed. The commander turned to address the assembled cadets, who were staring at Martinez with expressions ranging from shock to something that might have been fear. I believe this demonstration has revealed certain gaps in your education regarding species 7-842. One of the cadets, a Valerian with iridescent scales, raised a tentacle hesitantly. Sir, I don't understand. The briefing said humans were primitive, early spaceflight, no significant military capabilities. The briefings, Velthar said carefully, were intentionally vague, for good reason. He gestured to a holographic display. Computer, display classification, humanity, current status. The display flickered to life, showing Earth rotating peacefully in space. But the designation that appeared made several cadets recoil. Species 7-842, humans. Classification, do not engage, threat level, extreme contact. Protocol, minimal interference only. But that's the same classification as the Vexnari Hive Collective. Another cadet whispered, and they conquered 12 systems before. Before being contained, yes. Velthar interrupted, though I should note that humans have never been contained. They've never needed to be. Do you know why? He paused, letting the question hang. Because despite possessing the capability to be the most dangerous species in known space, they have chosen not to be. Martinez shifted uncomfortably. He hated these conversations, made him feel like some kind of zoo exhibit. Velthar continued, pulling up more data. Humans evolved on a death world, a planet so hostile that merely existing there required constant adaptation. Gravity, 1.3 times standard galactic norm. Atmospheric oxygen levels that would be toxic to most species. Megafauna that hunted them as prey for millions of years. And they didn't just survive, they thrived. They became apex predators on a planet full of apex predators. The hologram shifted, showing human evolutionary history. Martinez watched cadets flinch as they saw humanity's ancestors hunting creatures 3 times their size. But that's not what makes them truly dangerous, the commander said. Other species have evolved on harsh worlds. What makes humans unique is their psychology. He pulled up a neural scan. Human brains are wired for pattern recognition, persistence hunting, and most critically, pack bonding. They form emotional attachments to almost anything. Their own young, obviously, other humans. But also their animals, their machines, their ideas, and they will fight to the death for what they've bonded with. That seems like a weakness, Cadet Selvath croaked, from where the medics were still working on him. Martinez surprised himself by laughing. Yeah, you'd think so, wouldn't you? Velthar's mandibles clicked in agreement, except that it means humans will endure any hardship, face any odds, for those they consider theirs. During their first contact incident, which remains classified, a human civilian ship was fired upon by slavers. The nearest human military vessel was 3 days away. It arrived in 18 hours. That's impossible, the Valarian said. The drives would have melted. They did melt, Martinez said quietly. Crew of 47. They knew they wouldn't survive the trip. Came anyway. The room went very quiet. The slaver ship, Velthar continued, was a Corthian heavy cruiser. Military grade. It was found 3 days later, or what was left of it was found. The human ship had rammed it at .7 light speed. Both vessels were completely destroyed, all souls lost. He paused. The civilian ship's crew was already dead. The slavers had killed them before the military vessel arrived. The humans who sacrificed themselves knew they were dying for revenge, for justice, for an idea. This is why you don't engage humans. Another instructor had joined them, a crystalline Shardani who taught advanced tactics, not because you can't win, but because the cost of winning is always higher than you can imagine. Humans have a saying, I can be reasoned with, negotiated with, and bargained with, but if you harm what I love, I will show you what it means to be hunted by a persistence predator with nuclear weapons and no remaining fucks to give. Martinez winced. We don't all talk like that, but you all think like that. The Shardani replied gently. That's the point, Specialist Martinez. Your species was classified as do not engage, not because we fear your strength, though we should, but because we fear your love. A species that bonds with everything, and will sacrifice everything for those bonds cannot be conquered, only befriended. Cadet Selvath had managed to sit up, his regeneration finally kicking in. Then why are they here? Why teach us at all? Velthar's mandibles arranged themselves in what might have been a smile. Because 30 years ago, a human ambassador looked at our Galactic Council and said, You seem like good people, trying your best in a complicated universe. We'd like to help. And they meant it. He turned to Martinez. Humanity was offered 3 seats on the council, fleet command positions, preferential trade status. Do you know what they asked for instead? Martinez did know, but he let the commander tell it. Exchange programs, cultural integration, a chance to learn from us, and a chance to teach. Velthar looked back at the assembled cadets. We mocked them as primitives, as violent death-worlders playing at civilization, but they're not here to conquer. They're here because they've decided we're worth protecting. Even from ourselves, Martinez added, extending a hand to help Selvath to his feet. The Krethian hesitated only a moment before taking it. Especially from ourselves, Velthar agreed. Class dismissed. Tomorrow we'll discuss why insulting a human's mother is considered a capital offense in some human cultures. Martinez groaned. This was going to be a long deployment.